Hello, everyone. This is probably the last podcast that I will create for the year. Um, the purpose of this podcast is basically to bring together everything that we have learned so far, systematize it in a way that you can now actually see how all the links actually inform one another, and what all of this means to your assignment. It is gonna be a quite a easy but probably also easy podcast, because on the one hand we've done it before, and if you followed other lectures that we had, and especially those announced in the announcements, because these lectures reflect our current learning. The module has lectures and podcasts for students who want to work independently, but the announcements have actually interactions that happened on campus. And also we have collaborate sessions that I strongly recommend that you actually listen to, especially the one we had last week, which would have been around the 6th of May. That was a lecture that was very important for assignment 2. We only had one student, but it doesn't matter. As you know, sometimes I can actually talk to myself as I'm doing this at the moment. So it's going to be an easy lecture, because on the one hand we're putting this on all together, but it's going to be also a difficult lecture because it's so much, right? We've learned a lot. I wish I had 2 semesters of it, because there's so much more. And let me emphasize it again, the point that I actually want to make throughout the entire ELA 200. I feel that I don't feel. I am full, that this is my conviction, that in education we spend too much time, and we are misguided about it. We spend too much time on questions how to teach, and very little time on learning the things that I will be talking today about, and I've spoken before, what I consider to be what to teach, and what to teach not in terms of outcomes, but what tools do you have to teach all that stuff, like language variation, interpreting, analyzing, evaluating. There are entire fields of research committed to issue of language variation, of interpretation, analyzing, evaluation, what text is, what is a structure, what is the meaning of a structure. The idea from the 19th century that the text is grammar and words, as I said, it's 200 years old, and in order to stick to it, you'd have to tell me nothing else happened in linguistics and areas relevant to language, right? This is not possible. So again, what education actually does least is to actually look into those fields and think about how we could actually use the genre studies and communication studies in order to provide our pre-service teachers with tools for thinking about how to support students in analyzing text, in evaluating, in working with structure in a purposeful and culturally inclusive way. Right? Phonics is also not about words and letters and sounds and their manipulation. There's much more involved, because sounds don't exist. All there is a stream. And the only way that you make sense out of it, it's because you have a knowledge of English. That's why you can hear sounds. And then because you went through a training, you can say phonics is PHONIS. I can't do it. You could hear it, right? I have to think about PHONICS. I actually have to think about it, because I wasn't doing that sort of fast identification of those letters when I was 6. I was doing that in Polish. So, right. Anyway, so the world actually has moved, has done amazing things, and unfortunately, these amazing things are not infiltrating education. So, it is the goal of ELA 200 to bring some of that stuff to you. So, there. So, let's go to PowerPoint. So, basically, you are aware of the second part of this PowerPoint that is actually in Module 4, which teaches you how to design a unit of work. I always do some research, and I want to show you, I share with you a little bit of it, because your role as teachers is not to teach. You are not technicians, and you are not workers in a factory. You are people who today, for whatever reason, whether your age or whether your experience, will be young teachers, as soon young in the sense of practice, as you enter the profession. But within 10 years, you will be mentoring people. Even sooner, you will be mentoring people, and you will want to be in a leadership position. So you need to see where the world is moving. And the world has been moving now for a while, and people who actually move it forward have actually done it. It's an interdisciplinary world that we are entering. So as some of you who might have actually done all the modules and all the stuff I have actually dished out there for you in LA 200, you would have noticed that in my PowerPoints, I use all kinds of information. I use neuroscience, I use emotions, which is clinical psychology. I use genre studies when I talk to you about the texts, and I will repeat it, the texts, different types of genres do different things logically to text. I constructed a way of structuring a text on the basis of my work in the philosophy of inquiry and with my PhD students and so on. So you can see that I myself have looked into different types of research in order to bring it together and offer you some tools. So this is not just what I did. This is what the world wants us to do. The world wants us to go on YouTube, that's why it's there, to go and have a look what people do, have a look how people do, and the more you look, the more critical eye you develop. If you found one guy who does one thing and whatever, you become myopic. This is all I know, right? But no, you have to just check around. So there it is. Interdisciplinarity is the way forward. So what we will do today, we will look a little bit at the module 4 and 5 together. We cannot create a unit of work without actually thinking about assessment. We cannot create assessment unless we actually know what the meaning of content is. Right? So we will be looking at the meaning of content actually first. Then we will be actually, as a result of that, I will make a case to you that one cannot teach in any other way than by doing three things. Engaging students in large tasks. So I'm very pleased to see that in schools already we have a concept of units of work. That's wonderful. So we have those macro tasks, our units of work, which means a project-based learning, all of that, right? So we've got that, and I'm really happy. No student can do a thing, just like no child can do a thing, unless they actually have access to resources. You know, so when you put a child in a sand pit, do you put them just there naked? Oh, here's your sand. And they can play for a while, but after a while, they'll go to the child next door and they will steal their bucket. They will steal their shovel. They might even take their car, because it's so much fun to run the car through the tunnels they build. Then just do it all with your hands, right? I'm not saying hands are bad, but we have resources in order for, and also human capital, like maybe do it with another person. Oh my goodness, we could create bigger tunnels, right? So resources which are what do you call them, objects, and also resources which are so objects, concepts, or people. And what we also need, what we also need is tools. We need tools which allow students to actually manage information. So when they have this resource and there's a person talking like me now, what is the student gonna do with that? So there's a person talking. How do you enable students to actually manage information in those that they actually encounter in those resources? So students need tools for breaking down the stream and making sense out of it. Now, this is something that you probably never hear about, Because normally what happens, we are still living in a tradition where technology is totally misunderstood. So, and that just happened, and I probably know why it happened in Australia, but this is just too personal, so I'm just not going actually to address it. But I think basically the whole thing happened because of inadequacy of understanding of technology and its value in education. And when it was actually understood, then it was understood in a strange way. So anyway, technology allows us to break down information and reorganize it and manage it. This is nothing new, because what is the botanist doing? Or what is the physicist doing? I mean, the physicist has never seen a galaxy 5 billion years, light years from here, right? What do? They have tools and they create particular algorithms for getting the getting information. But getting information is not enough. Those tools are designed to work with those algorithms so that the physicists can actually break down information and say, oh my goodness, I just saw a black hole. Whether it was a black hole or not, we don't know. But at least in our interpretation, it is the same. The botanist. The botanist doesn't see a bacteria, right? They just had to use those tools that allow them to magnify objects the way they see objects, right? So then they said, oh my goodness, there's so much in the leaf, and there's so much the more we look, the more we see. So we need tools for managing information, breaking it down, reorganizing it so that students can make the most out of the resources. Now, this is what I teach on campus, and I don't think I have managed to actually translate it yet into collaborate sessions because of whatever reasons. I'll make a case to you, and I will ask you, I'll make a case, or maybe I will first ask you. So we're going to talk now about learning outcomes, right? So we're talking about learning outcomes. So this is the curriculum structure. Let's have a look at it. And we also have those capabilities and priorities, right? So there. And then we have that. Sorry, because I am recording, so we have preset window for recording. So we've got all of that, right? So when you go on campus, some of you, most of you won't, but when you're on the campus of a university, by any miracle, you end up there. And you see the vice chancellor of the university. Someone told you it's the vice chancellor. What do you say? Hi, mate. Or, oh my goodness, fancy seeing you here. What do you say? Do you say that? Right? Interesting, isn't it? What is it that you need to know in order to welcome the vice chancellor? Or let me put it differently. What is it that you need to know about the world? What kind of literacy practices do you have to have in practice in order to have a control of, in order to know when to say hi to someone? Okay, let's have a look. So let us play. I've done it on campus, and when you do it live, it's kind of like you've got to have all those thoughts rushing so that you can actually be hot. But basically, my claim is you've got to know all of these outcomes, which are in the curriculum, all of that content, all that. So it then gets translated into this. This is foundation. But today we're doing. Okay, I just said that I will never be teaching again. Now, I will not be teaching again in terms of a podcast, but I might be actually more active now on the on the discussion board and making connections now with higher grades. But it really doesn't matter whether I choose here foundation or year 2 or year 7, right? So I'm just using this one because it's cleaner. So my claim to you is that in order for you to say hi, you've got to know everything, every aspect of literacy practice in order to say hi or write hi. So I don't know how it's in English, but I know that in Polish, for example, you would actually have to know that you would, if you were to speak to the Vice Chancellor, nowadays it's okay to use any language variation, but you need to be aware whether you want to actually come across as a educated speaker of a particular dialect, or whether you want to not come across as an educated speaker of a particular dialect, whichever. So what else do we have in literacy? Text and in context, right? So hi is a text, and you've got to know whether hi would be appropriate to the Vice Chancellor. And then you very quickly sort of, you do mini, mini, mo, and you say, no. You don't say to the Vice Chancellor, hi. You would say, good morning, Vice Chancellor, or something like this. And if you didn't know, now you know. Okay, so here interacting with others very clearly, right? You have to actually have exposure to a variety of contexts in order for you to make now appropriate decisions. So you develop this understanding throughout life. You know, it's very cute when a 3-year-old waves to the Vice Chancellor from a pram and says, hi, everybody's laughing, and we know it's an appropriate behavior for a child. We're really happy that she can actually utter anything, right? We're just happy that she can say anything, because we're happy that what a child generates is a greeting, and we're really happy with it. But when a 30-year-old behaves in a similar way, then we're feeling sorry for them. Like, what step in life did they miss, right? So basically throughout life, we engage in life, and we develop increasingly complex pictures of relationships and the way we are to manage them in order to act correctly. So here you go, text, structure and audience. Text structure, hello Vice Chancellor is enough, or good morning Vice Chancellor is enough to say, right? You don't have to actually tell them that today you had a tough day and all of that. Even if the Vice Chancellor responds and says, how are you, right? So by all means, please do not be Polish about it, and do not tell them how you are. You just smile and you move on. That's English here. You don't tell them, when someone says to you, how are you? It's not an invitation for a small talk. So language for interaction, it's evaluative, it's about decision making and all of that. So am I making my case now? So you actually have to know how to organize it, how to express it, what to say, when to say it, how to say it. And someone was talking to me in classroom about even the punctuation, what's after the hi, exclamation mark, good morning Vice Chancellor, exclamation mark, right? So really what I'm trying to say is, you cannot produce anything out of your mouth without at the same time producing every other statement. Now, I know that I'm saying this and it sort of sounds weird, but I'm not saying to you ever anything that actually is not theoretically backed. This is, I mean, I can tell you Professor Chambers, I can't remember his Christian name anymore, I don't know, Chambers from University of, I think he might have been either Sydney, probably, French department, when he was writing about culture, right? I can tell you that. But I can, so there, so now you know. But basically, every time you say one thing, you said them all at the same time. And the reason for it is because when you make selections, then you made a choice on the basis of evaluating it against whatever was at the given moment available to you. And that could have been restricted by your memory or by your emotional feeling, as Damasio points, and somewhere there in those PowerPoints, if you actually stumbled on any of my resources, you would have noticed. So Damasio says everything is emotion. So even when you make evaluations of this kind, is emotionally based. Even the cognitive responses of the kind like good morning Vice Chancellor, but they are also impacted on the memory and whatever is at the very moment available to you. Nevertheless, you didn't say anything without evaluation, right? So my question is why? Why, when I see sometimes units of work, what I see is a person saying, I will teach them today this and that. So you mean that you will tell them that there's a Scottish dialect and then there is an indigenous dialect maybe, and there's accents in English, and then you will tell them that they are all equal and they all are okay, right? So the student hears this. Then next day you will teach them that, and then maybe a bit of that, and on top of it, then you, as a good teacher, you'll throw in a little bit of drills. Then you will teach them a little bit of that and a little bit of that. What kind of thinking underpins a pedagogy which basically says brick by brick, brick by brick? Yeah, I'll build a house brick by brick, which means learning is additive. And these descriptors here are seen as items. So we will organize them in a linear fashion, and we will teach brick by brick in a sequence. But never we will forget to put a little bit of phonics, because otherwise we will be bad teachers, right? That's a kind of regular thinking I see. Now, if you did that, then I argue you would basically enable your students. Let's assume that you even succeed at it, right? So what you would enable students is to create a relationship between this thing and this thing, but not this thing, 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 right? Lots of things are missing. So basically what we will be creating is a person that makes meaning in relation to particular relationships we give them, but not into others, right? So we obviously, as teachers, we hope that maybe in grade 3 they will link this and this and this and this. We can't do that. That's based on hope, not reality. I can't find the picture actually of the brain that I showed you in another slide, but I think it was during the collaborate session. And what I showed you, how the brain actually stores vocabulary, because everybody talks about vocabulary as if it was something to be learned, as if it was for real. Just because you say it, it doesn't mean that actually this is how the brain processes information, right? So when we actually look at that picture of the brain and vocabulary, we could say, I might draw it to you since I can't, I don't seem to be able to. So if this was your brain, it had a word of particular kind. We might just make it nice color, right? So it had the word, for example, door. It had it here, it had it here, and it had it here, it had it here, and it had it here. In fact, you get the point, right? It had it everywhere, everywhere just about. Because what happens? The brain doesn't have one cell for one thing. There's just a dictionary metaphor that somehow infiltrated itself into literacy. You know, the flashcards and everything, treating children as if they were chimpanzees. And I don't even know how chimpanzees, nobody knows how chimpanzees process information, but we teach them as if they were monkeys, you know, the monkeys that we have in our head, the sort of meaning. So basically we treat children, tell me this word, tell me this word, tell me this word. But if we're doing this, we're actually preventing children from creating relationships that enable them actually to scatter, or not to scatter those words across the brain in order to make rich associations, right? Because words don't exist in and of themselves. They are always living in association with other words. That's why I'm saying we don't study words. We don't actually learn words when we learn literacy or language. We learn how to express intentions, right? So, and you know it yourselves, you will know that I never talk about Vygotsky because he died a long time ago and he was a Marxist and irrelevant nowadays. in my view, and probably in the view to the people who argue for Vygotsky, they just don't know that. But even Vygotsky, the one that is so revered in education, he would say all action is purposeful. But word itself doesn't have a purpose, but intentions do. So those words are scattered around the brain, but not scattered in isolation to anything else. What they are organized in relation to other words to form relationships. So the brain is very careful, and all things are connected with one another so that we can actually react fast and in a rich way, right? So to finish my point regarding the curriculum content, a good person has written our good people have identified priorities. They identified priorities are context of behavior, community, indigeneity, neighbors, right? All of that. So, and sustainability and community is the same thing. So they identified particular context of behavior, and they identified particular values, which are the general capabilities. And then they identified different aspects that meaning invokes, right? Which is here, your content. But some other person who might have actually not had enough education, or I don't know what happened, turned the content, forgot the capabilities, forgot the priorities, turned the content into isolated self-meaning, meaning of having a meaning in and of themselves objects. And they say, today you will be doing language variation, tomorrow you will be doing punctuation, next day you will be doing features of literary text, next time we will talk about the audience. Honestly, if the brain processed information like this, we would have never been able to even say to each other hello. All right? So there, I will finish this session for this very moment in order to make this video short. And next, I will come to the assignment 2. Now, how to work with this concept of learning content where, as I suggest, everything is connected to everything. Therefore, you cannot teach content in isolation, aspects of content in isolation from one another. What you need to do is to think of ingenious ways whereby students can make those connections in order for them to learn to make informed decisions as they participate in literacy context, right? So what I will be talking about is that large tasks provide a context, pardon me, for particular needs of students to emerge, right? If you do not have a large context, then your needs are small. But if you have to do something big, like for example, something for an aged care center, as I often use, but it could be a book maybe for sick children in the hospital, right? You would want to create an online book for them with multimedia book for them, or something of this kind. So if you want to do that, it's a large task. It will elicit in students a lot of questions. It's a challenge. And now for these questions to be answered, students need what? Resources. How the heck do you do a book? How do you do a multimedia book? And they also need tools in order to make sense out of those resources. Not you as a translator of everything that they have on their mind, because it's not possible. And that will bring me to the next point, which is, this is obviously in the article which I wrote with Amy Cash, you will find the entire arguments for this point right here in red. So they come from different fields of corrective phonetics, neuroscience, psychology, and all that. But I collect all this evidence in order to now be able to tell you, you cannot teach. The only thing you can do is support students' learning, right? The only thing you can do is to support students' learning. That's why you need large tasks so that students' learning can be stimulated. You need resources so that students can confront their expectations against some other examples of life, right? And then you need tools so that students can actually manipulate information and see what and see how things look in when they actually look at them from one angle as opposed to from another, right? So students need tools. And in that way, once you have actually all of this in place, you are actually best placed to support students' learning without you being there and teaching, which is actually not a possible task. So there you go. So what I preach is that teaching is not possible. You cannot teach, you cannot pour anything into people's heads, you cannot identify any linear sequence that will be ideal, you cannot identify any groups of outcomes. What you can do, though, is enable students to reorganize what they know in order to engage to create increasingly powerful models of the world. It's an ongoing process. So students reorganize what they know in the context of the task, with the help of resources, and with the help of the tools for managing information. What students do, they reorganize what they know, and they build increasingly powerful, increasingly more informed systems for being in the world. All right, so that's the end of the part 1.